Greetings, I'm Addison along with Vikaash, Erfan, Gabriel and Rayson. We will be presenting events that highlighted Singapore's national resilience, from the collapse of Hotel New World to COVID-19 global pandemic. I will be explaining the roles of each of our group members and share a short narration of what happened during the collapse of Hotel New World. Gabriel will be narrating the recent COVID-19 event, Erfan will be elaborating on the difference between the two events, Rayson will be covering the similarities of the both events, and Vikaash will be explaining the impacts of the two events. The collapse of the Hotel New World was a devastating event that occurred on 15 March 1986. It was a 6-story building that collapsed and stunned many people by the deadly fall of the infrastructure that left 17 people severely injured and 33 people dead. Singapore back then did not have well-trained rescue personnel to assess the situation and was not equipped with the best equipment to salvage the situation. Hence, many desperate and helpful Singaporeans volunteered to help by using their bare hands to dig through the rubbles. Even government ministers and cabinet members showed up, displaying a sense of resilience and hope for the victims that were stuck under the collapsed building. Soon after, tunneling experts from Britain, Ireland and Japan that were working on Singapore's mass rapid transport arrived at the scene and handled the situation professionally, taking them 4 days to retrieve all the victims. Over to Gabriel.
The COVID-19 global pandemic started from December 2019 and is still going on until now. The government has taken many measures to stop the spread of COVID-19 and citizens have complied with the measures to reduce the number of coronavirus cases that rise daily. This pandemic has taken 27 lives and has infected 48,035 people as of 20th July 2020 in Singapore. Even after the cases have went down and the first phase of circuit breaker is over, the cautions are still being imposed and citizens of Singapore are still severely hit by this pandemic. Singapore had actually been a role model when the pandemic first broke out. Unfortunately, we had forgotten to take care of the dormitories for our migrant workers. The dormitories were very small and the workers were packed like sardines. Once one of the workers got the virus, it spread like wildfire and our COVID-19 cases skyrocketed. Seeing this, many Singaporeans decided to help reduce the cases and started packing items for the workers, for example, hand sanitizers and masks. Slowly, the cases have went down, but our fight with this nasty virus is far from over. With resilience, Singapore will pull through. Now, I'm going to hand it over to my friend Erfan.
Thank you, Gabriel. At the time of the Hotel New World collapse, the current task force, the SCDF, were unprepared for the collapse of the hotel and did not know how to proceed accordingly. Their initial effort to clear the rubble created problems for firemen trying to reach survivors. They even had to call in tunneling experts from other countries who were stationed in Singapore for the construction of the mass rapid transport for assistance. This firstly tells us that during the collapse of the Hotel New World, the SCDF at that time were unaware and unprepared for what to do. Meanwhile, during this COVID-19 pandemic, Singapore had been preparing and training task forces for what to do. Even before the first case of COVID-19 was reported in Singapore, they had effectively contained Singapore and even went the extra mile by identifying contacts and tracing them, showing us that Singapore had prepared for and was ready to battle COVID-19. Another key difference between this pandemic and the collapse of the Hotel New World is that much more, if not everybody living in Singapore was affected by COVID, while the Hotel New World collapse only affected the people involved within it. For example, Prime Minister Mr. Lee had conducted a circuit breaker period for all Singaporeans where every Singaporean limited how much they left their house, as well as making it mandatory for everyone to wear a mask when going out. Even us students were affected as we had to carry out lessons at home through our electronic devices. Meanwhile, the collapse of the Hotel New World mainly only affected those that were in the hotel when it collapsed and their family members, as well as the structural engineer of the hotel and the government. Over to you, Rayson.
Thank you, Erfan. The police and fire service back then are as alert, helpful and responsive as they are now. During the Hotel New World incident, police and fire service were alerted minutes after the incident and arrived in less than an hour and did their best to help the victims of the building collapse. Even now, like the police and fire services back then, the medical emergency is also alert, helpful and responsive as ever and may even arrive at the scene sooner than an hour. They strive to do their best to help the community and people so that they can keep the virus from spreading fast and to many people by the government setting up a task force, especially for this pandemic and to perform contact tracing. They created this so as to be able to discover close contacts and isolate them from the public before they can spread it to more people. This level of alertness gives Singaporeans a sense of security as they are in good hands. The government also spent a lot of money on both incidents to help fix the effects of the incidents. The Hotel New World Disaster Relief Fund, set up by the Community Church of Singapore, raised more than $1.5 million in donations from the public as well as private organizations and companies. The families of the 33 who died in the collapse each received $24,000, while an annuity scheme worth more than $900,000 was set up for the 35 children of the victims. The total amount allocated in the fall budget to deal with the fallout from the pandemic is only $3 billion, of which $52 billion is from the country's reserve. By way of comparison, it is more than what the government has ever spent annually for all of its programs, including defense, education, healthcare, and infrastructure development. Never before in Singapore's history has so much been set aside for one single event. Over to Vikaash.
Thank you, Rayson. Well, we can not only focus on the negative impacts of these events, but focus on what are the lessons learned from these incidents. For example, when investigating the cause of the Hotel New World collapse, it was concluded that the collapse was caused by the inadequate structural design, which was drawn by unqualified draughtsmen. Due to the deadly outcome, the government assumed a more active role in the building industry by having measures to include more spot checks on buildings and legislation, and to enforce maintenance checks every 5 years. The revised laws also encourage building owners to adopt more stringent standards in reviewing building plans, testing structural materials, and supervising structural works. Moreover, to improve the response of the SCDF to further disaster situations, the government integrated the Singapore Fire Service with the SCDF. With the efforts taken, there have not been any major collapses in Singapore apart from the Nicole Highway collapse in 2004 after the Hotel New World collapse. But you may be thinking, what can we learn from staying at home during this global pandemic? Well, we have learned to adapt to unforeseen circumstances. For example, when we were put in the circuit breaker period where we were not allowed to go to schools and workplaces, we adapted by having home-based learning and work from home, which both included having live video calling through multiple platforms such as Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and Google Meet. We learned how to stay productive at home and still have fun with our family. Although these events have been devastating, they highlighted the national resilience among Singaporeans and have also taught us some important lessons. With that, we have come to the end of our presentation. We hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you.